As of June, the Trump campaign had only a single office opened in Pennsylvania. And, by all accounts, Pennsylvania is going to be the tipping point state. Whoever wins that state wins the election. So, really, what are they spending the cash on? I speculated that maybe they're holding it in reserve for some sort of big last minute blitz. But again, that's all speculation. And we really can't know where the money's going because the FEC just won't do its job.
Hey everybody, we are back with my old friend Juleanna Glover. She's the chief executive of Ridgely Walsh, a corporate consultancy, and she's a former advisor to a bunch of Republican officials, John Ashcroft, George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, you might have heard of them, John McCain, and she's been one of the good ones, stalwart throughout the troubles of the last decade, and I'm excited to have her on the podcast. How you doing, Juleanna?
I'm well, Tim. It's good to be on here with you. Thank you
for doing this. I wish we could hang out in person. I do miss the cocktails in your little living room there, though not that much. Not that much. One of the problems is you do have to talk to the DC people that are there. So I'm missing you there. I want to talk about an op-ed that you wrote yesterday, and also because of your kind of experience in dealing and navigating with principals and kind of how they think. I also want to talk about the article that I wrote over the weekend about kind of the missing endorsements for Kamala from some of these ex-cabinet officials who I think know better. But first to your New York Times article. It was titled "Republican Donors, Do You Know Where Your Money Goes?" And you covered like this really underappreciated thing that has been happening in our campaign finance, where where you should be able to see where every dollar is spent because you have to file that as part of campaign finance laws. But what these campaigns have done, the Trump campaign the most egregiously, is create these like S corps that are catch-alls. And so that do a lot of the payments, and they just pay the money to this one group. And so you don't know where they're dishing out the money to. So talk a little bit about that process and what you speculate might be happening here.
Sure. So it's not actually S corps; it's LLCs largely,
and
I think LLCs are well known to be easily constituted, typically in Delaware, and you can do it basically with like a Zoom legal doc capability. They take about 15 minutes to build. So in this case, the summer, Tim, when it looked momentarily a couple weeks like Trump was going to be an inevitability. I just started really sort of flailing about looking for any way to get, a grip on an effective criticism of Trump, and just started spending time leafing through the FEC reports. So 69% of all of Trump's expenditures under his campaign went to an entity called American-Made Media Consultants. American-Made Media Consultants was, looked into who that was. Turns out that the Campaign Legal Center had filed a complaint at the FEC in the spring of 2021, asking the FEC to investigate the payments made to American-Made Media Consultants because those payments, it wasn't clear where they were going. And under FEC law, any expenditure over $200 must be disclosed. And you would also, under FEC law, you must know who the ultimate recipient is. Now, the reason this spurred additional inquiry is because the Campaign Legal Center was also able to discern that the entity, American-Made Media Consultants, had been set up by Jared Kushner in the fall of 2019. Laura Trump was momentarily named president of the entity, and the Legal Center also chronicled that one of Eric Trump's deputies from the Trump Organization ended up running this group. So let's cut to the chase. Do we know that they did anything wrong with American-Made Media Consultants? Do we know that money actually, all of the money was actually spent on campaigning or not? The fact is we don't know anything because, in the end, the FEC voted 3-3. The commissioners voted 3-3 to dismiss the complaint filed by the Campaign Legal Center. And at this point in time, Campaign Legal Center is appealing that decision in DC court. And, it could eventually, we could get some visibility into where those payments to AMMC actually ended up. But for now, we only have a set of facts that are really quite astounding on its face. And that's that 69% of the Trump expenditures went to an entity that was set up by Jared and headed by Laura.
Who would have thought? The Trump family scamming and grifting. So like one example of this, right, is I remember there was like a big stink when on one of the FEC reports, I believe it was like Melania's stylist or something was on there, her personal stylist, right?
Yeah.
And then that stopped happening, right? So like we're just speculating. Obviously, we don't know, right? So it's the kind of thing where maybe she just started paying it for it herself, or maybe that's the kind of thing that you start putting under this group, right? Various lawyers they've got to pay. Like who the hell knows? People that they want to they want to put on contract that might have been, potential witnesses in cases. Like all of this stuff is possible, and like it definitely could tie into his non-election related legal troubles too.
Yes, and it was reported at least in 2020 around AMMC specifically that the payments were made to Guilfoyle and to Laura Trump, retainers in the tens of thousands of dollars a month. Again, we don't know whether any of that is true, but that was reported around it. And then this cycle, there seems to be sort of a similarly troubling pattern. As you look through this cycle's FEC reports are really only available the details are only available up until the end of June. There's a new entity that makes frequent appearances under expenditures called Launchpad. And Launchpad is sort of another mystery LLC. If you go to the website, it doesn't say who's associated with it. It's sort of a generic ad agency, like no distinguishing characteristics about it whatsoever. And that entity is the recipient of around $15 million as of June 30th for the Trump 2024 campaign expenditures. I think one of the news outlets had tried to figure out what Launchpad was. It's, a Delaware formed LLC, but supposed to be headquartered in North Carolina. They checked with the North Carolina Secretary of State, where at least under the Delaware documents, it should be headquarters. The Secretary of State had no record of the business in state.
Yeah. So, I mean, the FEC is embarrassing. This is a long-term problem. That's the way in which our campaigns have just turned into totally unregulated Las Vegas. So that's a problem. And Trump stealing from his supporters is a long-held story that's been happening for a long time that I wish his supporters cared more about, but there's not a ton of evidence that they do. So that's the negative part of the story. Maybe the only silver lining to the story is that it is weird how little they've been spending on ads, and it's something you talk about in the piece, right? Like that. Given what they've raised and given what the Harris campaign and what the former Biden-Harris campaign had raised versus the spending, like there's a gap there that's pretty noticeable. Yeah,
it's a multiple actually. So depending on what sort of ad tracker you look at, it's anywhere from 3-to-1 to, Trump's matching Biden 2/3 to 1/3. Or spending 2/3 of what Biden Harris or Harris is spending. So he's spending less. He's also really noticeably the ground game is deeply lacking. Yeah. They're not spending money in key states. I think one of the stats that I used in the piece was that as of June, the Trump campaign had only a single office opened in Pennsylvania, and by all accounts, Pennsylvania is going to be the tipping point state. You have to win that. Whoever wins that state wins the election. So, I mean, really, what are they spending the cash on? I speculated that maybe they're, holding in a reserve for some sort of big last minute blitz. But again, that's all speculation, and we really can't know where the money's going because the FEC just won't do its job.
Anything else catch your eye?
I think the legal expenses are not fully understood. We're never going to know based on, how the FEC works now, how many dollars are being used to pay for the legal bills. We know that legal bills are now, tens of millions, estimated to be $50-60 million. And this is for a campaign that as of now has raised $260 million.
Wow.
So back of the envelope math, a third of the expenditures may be going to legal bills. And that's, how much money is actually going to be used for campaigning. My one last point on sort of how much money will be used for campaigning. Human nature being human nature, as we move into the fall and Trump's numbers, if perhaps they continue to drop and it looks increasingly unlikely that he could win, I think that it would be human nature for individuals to decide they're going to pad their nest as much as they can while the spigots are blowing cash. And it could be a self-fulfilling possibility, self-fulfilling prophecy that they perpetuate the likelihood that they lose because the fact that they think they're going to lose, so they're just going to spend all the money, self-deal, pay themselves as much money as they can while the money's flowing in.
Yeah, get while the getting's good. Your lips to God's ears. Okay. Well, one of the things that could help speed that process up would be some of our old friends actually doing what you and me have done and explicitly supporting Kamala Harris. And I'm just wondering, what is the psychology? What is happening here that we haven't? We kind of assume Liz will get there in the fall, but Esper was wishy-washy on TV yesterday. Christie's been wishy-washy. Going back to Bush administration officials, there was some gossip going around that Condi and Bob Gates were going to do something, but I think maybe that was false. I don't know. What you kind of live in these worlds. What do you think is the holdup from the more big ticket Bush officials as well as the kind of spurned Trump world people?
I think for many of those, and we can talk about the specific names, but for many of those, I think they are going to come home in the end for Harris.
You do?
Maybe some sort of careful, effective planning, I hope, which is, the convention itself was really quite a blockbuster.
Okay.
It was extraordinarily well done. I don't know whether it would have been strategically wise to unveil any of these prominent Republicans during the convention, but I do think a cadence of holding these prominent Republicans potentially for after the debate, where if she does okay rather than amazing, then then you would roll out some very prominent endorsements following that. But I think holding the endorsements that we are pretty sure, based on at least how they've spoken previously, are going to be supporting the Democratic ticket in the end. The ones that are waffling over the last couple of days, let's wait and see where the poll numbers end up. I think, some of the
fingers
people
in the wind for some of these guys. Yeah.
Some of these folks are young. They want to go on and have political careers after. A lot of their future entirely hinges on whether Harris could indeed win by a lot. And if she does, then I think they'll have a place at the table setting up what the future of the Republican Party is. If it's close, if it looks really close, and it feels like they are, it's going to be a couple yards in a cloud of dust and there'll be no resounding verdict on Trumpism, I don't know that they're going to support because, I think they will support because I think that at that point in time, their voices will be needed and necessary. And they'll feel as though they won't have an opportunity to really sort of dig in and rebuild the party afterwards.
I love optimistic Juliana. I hope that that's true. My one area of disagreement is I don't know if there's a lot of strategizing going on. I put Liz in a separate category.
Yeah.
I think that the rest of them, I have on good authority that I don't think that there's a strategic cadence being planned. There might be a strategic cadence that just falls into place. A lot of things have fallen into place for Kamala over the last 5 weeks, and would love for that hot streak on the craps table to continue. But anyway, are there other things besides Liz that you feel like really are going to get there, and they just need a little nudge? Is there anybody else that stands out?
I think Harris is consolidating control over her campaign now. It's only been a couple weeks since it was understood that she was going to be the nominee. And I think the long-term strategic planning that has her imprint and her leadership's imprint is really just digging in and getting started. And I fully expect a charm offensive to bring in every Republican of significance that would be inclined to support a Democrat against Trump this fall. And I think timing is going to be important. It needs to be a cadence of high-profile names throughout the fall.
This is why we bring in Juliana. I'm over here, rain cloud. I'm stressing about this. I'm wringing my hands. And you're like, it's happening. It's happening, girl. Calm down. So I appreciate that. I hope that you're right. And maybe we'll have you back on in a couple months. We'll talk about it. Thank you very much for that piece in the New York Times. Thanks for coming on the Bulwark Podcast. First time for Juleanna. We will be talking to you soon.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you all.
All right, guys, everybody, we got a big one tomorrow. We'll be back. Come check us out then. Peace.